Welcome, fellow knowledge explorers, to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on quite an intellectual adventure. We're going deep into the mind of one of history's most towering thinkers. We've been handed this treasure trove of his writings, really the bedrock of Western thought, our mission, to pull out the essential nuggets, those aha moments.
Yeah, the key takeaways.
Exactly, to help you swiftly grasp his profound influence. So think of this as a shortcut, maybe, to being well-informed about ideas that have shaped centuries, ideas that, still pop up everywhere.
Indeed. We're going to examine the core themes, the fundamental ideas, and the pretty intricate philosophy woven through a significant body of Aristotle's work.
Right.
Our deep dive will focus on three major pillars: his groundbreaking contributions to logic.
The thinking tools.
Precisely. Then his foundational insights into metaphysics and natural philosophy, the nature of reality itself.
Big stuff.
And finally, his meticulous observations in biology and psychology. For each one, we'll explore the historical context, unravel his core concepts, try to bring them to life with some vivid examples.
Make it stick.
Yeah, and trace their immense influence on later thought. It's quite a journey.
It really is. Think of it as peeking over the shoulder of a philosophical giant, witnessing the birth of systematic thought. We're going beyond just summaries here.
Definitely beyond summaries.
We want to understand the why and the how behind his ideas, making connections that hopefully illuminate their lasting relevance for you, whether you're, analyzing an argument you had online or just pondering the nature of life itself. Okay, let's unpack this. To really appreciate Aristotle's comprehensive vision, we probably have to start with the bedrock, right?
Yeah.
The intellectual scaffolding he built for clear thinking, his groundbreaking work on logic.
The architecture of thought, Aristotle on logic.
So before Aristotle, philosophical arguments could be a bit, messy.
Yeah, maybe a bit freeform is a polite way to put it.
Right. Brilliant ideas might be out there, but there wasn't really a universal method to rigorously analyze them, to test their structure or make sure the conclusions actually followed from the premises.
Exactly. He essentially gave us the world's first comprehensive toolkit for rational thought, a structured way to analyze and construct arguments.
And this became the standard for centuries.
For centuries. It was about bringing order, a kind of intellectual discipline, to what could sometimes feel like, just people asserting things.
An operating manual for thinking.
That's a great way to put it. And what's truly fascinating here is that his logical works, which we collectively call the organon, that's Greek for tool or instrument.
Ah, okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, they weren't just a side project for him. They weren't casual observations. He saw them as the very foundation, the absolute prerequisite for acquiring any scientific knowledge, for understanding the world properly.
So you needed this before you could do science or philosophy effectively.
That was his view. He meticulously systematized how we categorize things, how we define terms, and ultimately how we reason deductively. He was, in essence, building the operating manual for rational thought itself.
Laying the groundwork for telling good arguments from bad ones.
Precisely. And this wasn't just about winning debates in the agora, right? It was about ensuring that knowledge could actually be built on solid, verifiable, logical ground. Real understanding.
Okay, so it's like an operating manual, and part of that foundational toolkit starts with something that seems simple but is actually incredibly profound. His categories. This is where he starts breaking down reality.
Yeah, into its most basic descriptive elements. What are these categories all about?
What was the big idea there?
Well, the real aha moment with Aristotle's categories isn't just that he made a list of ways to describe things, it's that he gave philosophy a rigorous grammar for reality.
A grammar for reality, I like that.
He basically said, look, before you argue, before you even try to understand something, you need to know what kind of thing you're talking about. Are you talking about the thing itself, its substance?
Okay, the core thing.
Or are you talking about its size quantity? Or maybe its relationship to something else, This simple framework, simple sounding, it prevented potentially millennia of conceptual confusion.
By forcing clarity right at the start.
Exactly. And it showed how deeply our language, when we use it carefully, actually maps onto the structure of the world. So at its core, Aristotle's theory of categories is about understanding the basic elements of reality and, at the same time, the basic ways we can truly and meaningfully say something about a subject. He identifies 10 fundamental types of predicates.
10 ways to talk about things.
10 ways something can be affirmed or denied about a subject, yeah.
So it's about making sure we're all like speaking the same intellectual language about the same kind of thing before we even start reasoning. And the most fundamental distinction he makes here is substance. This feels like the absolute bedrock, doesn't it?
It absolutely is the bedrock. He makes this key distinction between primary substances and secondary substances.
Okay, what's the difference?
A primary substance is an individual concrete thing, like this particular microphone we're using right now,
Got it.
or that specific oak tree you see outside your window. It's unique because, as Aristotle puts it, it's neither said of a subject nor in a subject.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Neither said of nor in.
Right. It just means it doesn't depend on anything else to exist as itself. And it's not just a description of something else. It simply is. It's the ultimate what is, the fundamental thing.
So if I'm getting this right, my coffee cup sitting here is a primary substance. It just is, independently.
Precisely. Your coffee cup is a primary substance. You wouldn't say this coffee cup isn't a subject in the same way that the quality white is in the coffee cup.
Right. White is a property of the cup.
Exactly. And the cup itself isn't said of a subject in the way that the general term cup is said of this particular coffee cup.
Ah, okay. This cup is a cup, but the cup itself isn't just the word cup.
Correct. It is the ultimate subject of all predicates. It's the bedrock existent. Now, secondary substances are the species and genera that primary substances belong to, like cup in general or tableware.
The categories that falls into.
Yes, these are said of a primary substance. For example, this particular coffee cup is a cup. But they're also not in a subject. The concept of cup isn't floating in the individual coffee cup in the same way the color white is in it.
I see. It's a classification, not a physical part.
Exactly. And this distinction, though it might seem subtle, is absolutely crucial for understanding what truly exists fundamentally versus what exists just as an attribute or a property. It separates the real, independent things from their characteristics, prevents us confusing the specific thing with its general kind.
That clarifies it beautifully, the difference between this specific thing and the kind of thing it is. So with substance as the anchor, Aristotle then maps out the whole landscape of how we describe anything, giving us his famous 10 categories. And these aren't just labels, are they? It's more structured than that.
Oh, not at all just labels. Beyond substance, he proposes 9 other categories, or fundamental ways things can be described or predicated. You've got quantity, quality, relation, place, time, position, state, action, and affection.
Wow, that's comprehensive.
It is. They represent distinct modes of being or ways we can talk about something. Let's maybe look at a couple more just to get the feel. Take quantity. It has a unique characteristic. It admits of a more and a less, and is called both equal and unequal.
So a 5-foot person and a 6-foot person have different quantities of height, and we can compare them. One's taller, unequal height, or maybe 2 people are the same height, equal.
Exactly. A body can be equal or unequal in size. A number can be equal or unequal. A period of time can be equal or unequal. But notice, you wouldn't usually describe a condition like health or a quality like the color white as being equal or unequal. You'd say similar or dissimilar, perhaps.
Right. You wouldn't say this white is unequal to that white. You'd say maybe it's a different shade of white, a different quality.
Precisely. So each category has its own distinct properties of predication, its own rules for how we talk about it. Understanding these distinctions helps prevent what philosophers call category errors, like trying to quantify a quality or asking about the place of a relationship.
That distinction really helps solidify what makes a quantity unique. What about relatives? How do they behave differently?
Relatives are fascinating because they're always spoken of in relation to correlatives that reciprocate. Basically, if something is a relative term, it inherently points to something else, and that something else points back.
Like, give me an example.
Okay, a slave is always a slave of a master.
Right.
Right, and a master is always a master of a slave. You can't really define one without implicitly defining the other. They're a pair.
Okay, I get it. Like parent and child.
Exactly, or double and half. The double is double of a half, and the half is half of a double. Many relatives also admit of a more and a less. Like something can be more similar or less similar to something.
But not all of them.
Not all. For instance, double itself isn't more double or less double. It's a fixed absolute relation in that sense. The key insight here is recognizing this inherent interdependence in certain kinds of descriptions. Some terms just don't make sense on their own.
So it's about mutual dependence in description.
Okay.
He also talks about different types of opposition within categories, right? This feels like it's getting closer to how we actually argue or disagree.
Precisely. Opposition is another critical concept for logic, and Aristotle identifies several forms. The most common one is contraries. Now, within contraries, there's a further distinction.
Okay.
Some contraries can have an intermediate between them. Think white and black. Gray is clearly an intermediate.
Lots of shades in between.
But for other contraries, there is no intermediate, like sickness and health, or odd, and even for numbers.
You're either sick or healthy, basically. A number's either odd or even. No in-between state.
Right. And in those cases, with no intermediate, one of the contraries must always belong to the thing that's capable of having them. A person capable of health and sickness must be one or the other. A number must be odd or even.
Okay, that's contraries. What else?
Then you have privation and possession. Think sight and blindness. Blindness is the privation, the lack of sight in something that would naturally have sight.
Like a human or a dog. A rock can't be blind.
Exactly. And what's interesting here is that these don't always reciprocate, like the master-slave example. Sight isn't called sight of blindness. It's just sight. Blindness is defined in relation to sight, but not necessarily the other way around.
Ah, okay. So the relationships aren't always symmetrical.
Correct. This highlights the really nuanced ways terms relate to each other in his system. It gives us a very precise vocabulary for understanding disagreement and difference. And underlying all this is a core principle.
Yeah.
In valid reasoning, you can't end up with two true statements that are directly opposed. If one statement is true, its direct contradiction has to be false. Logical consistency is absolutely paramount.
It's really clear this isn't just a list, it's a deep structure, a way of understanding the fundamental layout of reality and how our language hooks into it. It's like a foundational layer for all clear communication, almost. How did this actually influence thinkers who came later? Was it as big a deal as it sounds?
Oh, immensely influential. This framework provided a systematic way to analyze predication, how we attribute properties to things, and being itself. It basically gave philosophy and science a common language for centuries.
A shared starting point.
Exactly. It shaped metaphysics, epistemology, that's the theory of knowledge, and even things like grammar throughout the medieval period and well beyond. Thinkers used these categories to classify absolutely everything, from the attributes of God in theology to the qualities of everyday objects.
Wow.
It forced a certain rigor in thinking about what exactly we're talking about, making sure we're clear, preventing logical fallacies that often sneak in when we mix up categories, asking how much about a quality or where, about a relationship.
Getting clear on the terms.
Getting clear on the terms and the kinds of things those terms apply to. The very idea of breaking down concepts into their constituent parts for analysis, which is fundamental in so many fields today, right? Science, law, programming.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can trace that analytical impulse directly back to this foundational work in the categories. It's really hard to overstate its impact on the very structure of Western thought.
That's a powerful legacy. Okay, so from these fundamental building blocks of reality and description, we move to the mechanics of putting those blocks together logically. His prior analytics. This sounds like the real blueprint for logical thinking itself, the operating system, maybe.
It is indeed the operating system. The prior analytics is the absolute heart of Aristotle's formal logic. It focuses squarely on syllogistic reasoning.
The syllogism, that's the famous all men are mortal thing.
That's the classic example, yes. A syllogism is a specific type of deduction, a formal argument structure usually involving three terms: a major term, a minor term, and a crucial middle term.
Okay, break that down. Major, minor, middle.
The middle term is the key. It acts as the bridge, the connector. It links the major term, which is usually the predicate of the conclusion, and the minor term, usually the subject of the conclusion.
So in all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Man is the middle term.
Precisely. Man links mortal, the major term, and Socrates, the minor term. Aristotle points out that if the same term isn't explicitly mentioned more than once to make that link, you simply can't make a valid deduction. The bridge is missing.
Okay.
But Aristotle goes further than just defining a valid conclusion. He's really interested in what he calls a scientific deduction.
Ah, so not just reaching any old conclusion that happens to follow, but reaching one that actually explains something, one that truly advances knowledge.
Exactly that. For the deduction to be properly scientific, it needs to lead to genuine understanding. And crucially, it must depend on premises, starting points that are true and primitive and immediate and more familiar than and prior to and explanatory of the conclusion.
Wow, that's a high bar. What does all that mean?
It means your starting points have to be solid. They should be true, obviously. Primitive and immediate suggests they shouldn't need further proof themselves. In that context, they're foundational. More familiar than and prior to means they should be better known or logically antecedent to the conclusion. And most importantly, they must be explanatory. They have to actually show why the conclusion is true.
So just having a technically valid structure isn't enough for real science.
Not for Aristotle's ideal of scientific demonstration, no. You might have a logically sound argument, but if your premises are just opinions or irrelevant or less certain of the conclusion, you haven't achieved real scientific understanding. It's the difference between merely concluding that something is the case and truly understanding why it is the case.
He also lays out different kinds of propositions and conversion rules, right? These are like the atomic elements, the basic sentence types that make up the syllogisms.
Yes, he meticulously details 4 types of categorical propositions. These are the building blocks. First, universal affirmative. A belongs to every B. Your classic example. Every dog is a mammal.
Okay. All A are B.
Second, universal negative. A belongs to no B. For instance, no fish is a bird.
No A or B. Got it.
Third, particular affirmative. A belongs to some B, like some students are athletes.
Not A or B.
And fourth, particular negative. A belongs to not every B, or some A are not B. Example, not every bird can fly, or some mammals are not dogs.
Some A are not B. Okay, the 4 basic types.
Right, and then he outlines these really precise rules for conversion, basically, which propositions you can logically flip around while keeping them true.
Look around.
Yeah, like swapping the subject and predicate terms. For example, a universal negative proposition converts directly. If A belongs to no B, then it logically follows that B will belong to no A.
So if no fish is a bird, then no bird is a fish. Makes sense.
Exactly. And a particular affirmative also converts, but only partially. If some pleasure is good, then it follows that some good will be pleasure.
Yeah.
But, and this is crucial, a universal affirmative doesn't necessarily convert fully. Every dog is a mammal doesn't mean every mammal is a dog.
Right, obviously not.
And a particular negative, like some animal is not man, doesn't necessarily convert to some man is not animal. Understanding these rules is like having a shield against faulty reasoning. It teaches you exactly what you can and, importantly, what you cannot logically infer just by rearranging a statement.
That's incredibly granular, but I can see why it's so important for logical precision. He even distinguishes between different types of deductions and how we can use them to refute arguments, which feels very practical, especially today.
Absolutely. Deductions themselves are further distinguished by the arrangement of their terms into what Aristotle called figures, the first, second, and third figures, depending on where that crucial middle term sits in the premises.
Okay, so the structure matters.
The structure is key. Some deductions are perfect, meaning the conclusion is clearly and immediately obvious from the premises, like the Socrates is mortal example. Others are imperfect, meaning they're still valid. But you might need to perform some of those conversion steps or other logical operations to make the validity absolutely clear. He even talks about potential deductions, exploring possibility.
The refutation, how does that fit in?
Just as important as building good arguments is knowing how to take bad ones apart. Refutation, for Aristotle, is technically a deduction that establishes the contradictory of the original statement you want to refute.
So you prove the opposite is true.
You prove the direct opposite. And he makes a really interesting point. It's impossible to achieve a refutation if your opponent concedes nothing universally, or if everything they concede is negative. Why? Because, as he points out, you can't make any deduction if all your premises are negative statements. No A is B, no B is C, doesn't lead anywhere.
You need some positive connection somewhere to build a logical chain.
Exactly. It underscores the need for some common ground, some positive assertion, even when you disagree, in order to have a logical engagement at all. If you want to properly debunk someone's argument, you can't just deny everything. You need to find a way to show either its internal contradiction or how it rests on false premises.
To really make these abstract logical structures stick, maybe we can walk through a few classic examples. How did Aristotle actually apply this blueprint?
Certainly. We already used the classic syllogism structure. If A belongs to every B, every animal is mortal, and B belongs to every C, every man is an animal, then A belongs to every C, every man is mortal. The power is that if your premises are true and the structure is valid, the conclusion is undeniable.
Rock solid.
Then consider the distinction between contradiction versus contrariety again. Every man is good and no man is good are contraries. They can't both be true, sure, but they can both be false.
Right. Maybe some men are good and some aren't.
Exactly. But every man is good and not every man is good, or some men are not good, are contradictories. It's absolutely impossible for both to be true, and it's also impossible for both to be false. One must be true and the other must be false. There's no middle ground. Aristotle hammers this home. It is not possible for either a true belief or a true contradictory statement to be contrary to a true one. Valid reasoning leads to consistency. That's non-negotiable.
So logic enforces consistency.
It demands it. He also illustrates these points by dissecting sophistical arguments, the kind of tricky, sometimes misleading arguments that were common back then. For instance, when discussing refutation, he brings up Zeno's famous paradoxes against motion.
Achilles and the tortoises, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Now, even if someone were to somehow prove that motion is impossible, using a clever argument like Zeno's, Aristotle would say that's not a true solution or refutation if the underlying deduction itself is flawed or based on false assumptions. A real solution, for Aristotle, isn't just about getting a surprising conclusion. It's about an exposition of a false deduction, showing on what its falsity depends.
So it's not enough to show what's wrong, you have to show why it's wrong logically.
Precisely. You have to expose the error in the reasoning itself. A critical skill, especially today, with so much misinformation floating around.
Definitely. Any other examples?
One more subtle one is his discussion of arguments that depend on the consequent, which he sees as a branch of reasoning based on accident or non-essential properties. He uses the example that both snow and the swan are the same as something white. They share the property of whiteness.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that snow and swans are the same thing, obviously. Mistaking a shared consequent, whiteness, for a direct cause or an identity is a common logical slip-up.
Like saying, all successful entrepreneurs drive fancy cars, and then concluding, well, he drives a fancy car, so he must be a successful entrepreneur.
Exactly. That's inferring, based on the consequent, an accidental correlation, not a necessary link. Aristotle was already warning against that kind of fallacious thinking over 2,000 years ago.
So this really is the blueprint for logical reasoning, isn't it? How we build airtight arguments and, just as importantly, dissect flawed ones. It feels incredibly relevant for just navigating daily life, let alone academic debates.
Absolutely. The prior analytics provided the very first formal system of logic the world had ever seen, and it remained virtually unchallenged as the definitive account of deductive reasoning for over 2 millennia. Think about that.
That's incredible.
It profoundly influenced the development of mathematics, science, philosophy, everything that relies on rigorous argument. It laid the groundwork for how we still evaluate the validity of arguments today. It taught us to identify premises, conclusions, and the precise relationships between them, creating a universal standard for intellectual inquiry. Even when later logicians like Frege and Russell developed modern symbolic logic, they were often reacting to or consciously building upon the incredible foundation Aristotle established. His work is truly a timeless guide for anyone seeking clarity and truth in reasoning.
The Fabric of Existence, Aristotle on Metaphysics and Natural Philosophy.
Okay, so from that incredibly precise scaffolding of logical thought, Aristotle then launches into, well, the colossal questions of existence itself.
Yeah, the really big ones.
He wasn't content just knowing how we think. He wanted to uncover the very fabric of reality. This is his metaphysics, right? Moving into understanding the natural world. He wasn't afraid to ask things like, what does it mean to be? And why is there something rather than nothing?
Indeed. And he wasn't satisfied with the answers he found in earlier philosophers. You had thinkers like Anaxagoras talking about infinite unmixed elements, or Democritus with his theory of indivisible atoms moving in a void.
The atomists.
Right. Aristotle respected them, but he sought a more, let's say, integrated understanding, one that could better explain change and being within the world we actually experience.
The world of growth and decay, movement.
Exactly. He found their explanations a bit lacking because they struggled to really account for the complexity of generation, how things come into being and perishing, how they cease to be. How could simple, abstract, unchanging principles like atoms fully explain the dynamic, observable world around us? A world full of transformation.
He wanted to get at the how of change, not just the what things are made of.
Precisely. He wanted to understand how things come into being, change their properties, and eventually cease to be, not just what their ultimate constituents might be. And this led him to a theory of substance that was deeply intertwined with process, observation, and potential.
And central to that is his re-examination of substance, but this time looking at matter and form. He's building on his logical categories, but now he's digging deeper into how things actually exist in the physical world, what they're made of, how they're structured.
He certainly does. Building on that logical foundation, Aristotle dives deeper into what it means to be a substance in the physical realm. And here, he posits that all physical substances, everything you can touch and see, are composed of two fundamental co-principles: matter and form.
Matter and form. Okay, define those for us.
Matter, hyle in Greek, is the potentiality for something. It's the raw, underlying stuff that can take on different shapes or essences. Think of it as what it's made of, but in a very basic sense, the potential.
Like the lump of bronze before it's a statue.
Exactly. And form, morphe or enos, is what makes it actual. It's essence, it's structure, it's what it is to be that thing. The form is what gives the matter its specific identity and function. It makes the potential actual.
So back to the bronze statue example. The bronze itself is the matter, but the specific shape, maybe it's a discus thrower that's the form. The form makes it the statue, not just a lump of bronze. That makes sense.
Precisely. The bronze is the matter, the statue's shape and structure is its form. And Aristotle often considered the matter as part rather than whole, in a way, because it's the form that contains or determines the matter, giving the entity its unity and definition. The form is what defines the entire thing.
And this distinction is key to understanding change.
Absolutely crucial. It explains how things can change without utterly ceasing to exist. The matter persists through the change, but the form alters. So if you melt down that bronze statue...
The matter is still there.
Right. The matter of bronze remains, but the statue's form is lost. The bronze now has the potential to take on a new form. Maybe it gets cast into a bell or just cools into an ingot.
Okay. And this leads directly to another huge Aristotelian concept: potentiality and actuality.
Yes, dunamis and energia, or entelecheia. This is absolutely core to his metaphysics and physics. A thing is potentially dunamis, something, when it has the capacity or power to become it.
Like the block of marble is potentially a statue.
Or potentially rubble, or potentially a floor tile. It has a raw material capacity to become any of those things. It is actually energeia, that thing, when its form is realized, when the potential is actualized. So when the sculptor carves the marble into a statue, the potentiality for being that statue is actualized.
So an acorn is potentially an oak tree. It has the inherent capacity. But it only actually becomes an oak tree when that potential is fully realized through growth.
Exactly. It's a really powerful way to understand not just change, but growth, development, learning, everything that involves realizing an inherent capacity. It applies not just to nature, but even to us. We have the potential to learn Spanish, say.
But we only actualize it by studying and practicing.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is how he applies this even to mixtures or compounds. He says the compound may be actually something different from its constituents, but each constituent might still be potentially what it was before they combined.
How does that work?
Think about water and air again. When air was in a particular place, water can come and replace it. The place itself is separable from the thing occupying it. But the matter and form of, say, the water aren't separable from the water itself. They are intrinsically linked in the substance. The potentiality and actuality reside within the substance.
He even applies this potentiality-actuality distinction to human abilities, right? Like knowing something.
Yes, it's a key example for him. We can talk about a person as a knower in two different senses. First, they are potentially capable of knowing. They have the innate rational faculty, the capacity for knowledge, even when they're asleep or thinking about something else.
Okay, the basic ability is there.
Right. But they are also a knower in a second sense when they are actually exercising that knowledge, actively thinking, recalling information, understanding something. It's in this active exercise, this actuality, that, as Aristotle intriguingly says, thought is then able to think of itself.
Thinking about thinking.
Yeah. This potentiality distinction helps explain how we can possess abilities without constantly performing them. It bridges the gap between having a capacity and actually using it.
Okay, that's a really useful framework. Now, moving on to perhaps his most famous metaphysical tool, the four causes. This seems to be his way of asking why, in the most complete sense possible. Not just one why, but four different kinds of why. This feels incredibly comprehensive. How do these four causes help us explain reality, not just describe it?
You're right, it is incredibly comprehensive. To fully understand anything, especially in natural philosophy, Aristotle argued that you absolutely must identify its four causes, or perhaps better, four explanatory factors, HEI. These aren't usually four separate events leading up to something. They're four distinct aspects of explanation that, taken together, provide a complete account of why a thing is the way it is.
Four lenses for answering why. Okay, what are they?
First, the material cause. This is simply that out of which a thing comes to be and which persists. It's the stuff, the raw material.
The bronze of this statue, the wood of the table.
Exactly. The bricks and wood of a house, the flour and water for a loaf of bread, that's the material cause. Second, the formal cause. This is the form or the pattern, the definition of the essence. It's the structure, the blueprint, the what it is to be, that specific thing.
So the shape of the statue, the discus thrower design, the architectural blueprint of the house, the recipe for the bread.
Perfect. It's the essence that makes it that particular kind of thing. Third, the efficient cause. This is the primary source of the change or rest. It's the agent, the maker, the thing that brings it about or initiates the change.
The sculptor who shapes the bronze, the potter who constructs the house, the baker who bakes the bread, the who or what makes it happen.
Exactly, the mover or the maker. And fourth, the final cause, telos. This is that for the sake of which a thing is, its purpose, its function, its end goal. Why does it exist? Why was it made?
Okay, so the purpose of the statue might be artistic expression or honoring someone. The purpose of the house is to be a dwelling. The purpose of the bread is nourishment, the ultimate why.
Precisely, the goal or end towards which it tends.
What's really remarkable here, though, is how these aren't always completely distinct categories in practice. They can overlap in really interesting ways, which makes it less like a rigid checklist and more like a holistic way of understanding.
Indeed, that's a key insight. Aristotle points out that very often, especially in natural things, the what, the formal cause, and that for the sake of which the final cause are actually one and the same, or very closely related.
How so?
Think about a living organism. Its form, the complex structure and organization that makes it, say, a human being is inherently tied to its function or purpose. Living, growing, sensing, reasoning. The essence implies the function. The form is for the sake of the end.
So being human, form, inherently involves the purpose of living a human life, final cause.
Right. And furthermore, the primary source of motion, the efficient cause, can also be the same in species as the formal cause. His classic example is man generates man.
Yeah, the father, efficient cause, generates a child who also have the human form, formal cause.
Exactly. The efficient cause imparts the form of its own species, and the final cause of that generation. Aristotle would say it's for the living thing to partake in the eternal and divine as much as possible by perpetuating its kind, ensuring the species continues.
Wow, that adds a whole other layer.
It does. This four-cause framework allows us to assign the why in a way that Aristotle thought was proper to science, looking beyond just immediate physical interactions to the intrinsic nature, structure, agency, and purpose of things.
He must have used lots of examples from nature.
Oh, constantly. Besides man generating man, think about milk in mammals. He explicitly observed that nature makes milk in viviparous females for the sake of the nourishment of animals after birth. That's a clear, final cause. The milk exists for a purpose. It's not just some random bodily fluid.
It serves a function.
It serves a vital function. Or take the building of a house again. You have the material cause, bricks, wood, the formal cause, the blueprint or design, the efficient cause, the builder and their tools, and the final cause, providing shelter, a place for living. Each offers a different yet essential piece of the explanatory puzzle. This teleological perspective, the idea that things in nature and even artifacts have inherent purposes or ends, was an absolute cornerstone of his natural philosophy.
This quartet of causes is incredibly comprehensive. It really feels like a template for understanding almost anything. How did it actually guide inquiry after Aristotle? And, I mean, does it still have relevance today? Could a modern scientist or maybe an engineer unknowingly be applying these principles?
It became absolutely fundamental. This analytical framework shaped the way people understood causation and explanation, guiding both scientific and philosophical inquiry for centuries. It cemented teleological thinking in terms of purpose and function as a central part of studying nature.
So people looked for the purpose of everything in the natural world.
Largely, yes. This deeply influenced medieval scholastic philosophy and theology, especially someone like Thomas Aquinas, who brilliantly integrated Aristotle's four causes into his theological system, explaining God's role as, among other things, the ultimate final cause of everything.
An ultimate purpose.
Right. Now, it's true that later thinkers, particularly during the scientific revolution, think Galileo, Newton, began to challenge the primacy of final causes in explaining physical phenomena. They focused much more on material and efficient causes, how things physically interact.
Pushing and pulling mechanics.
Exactly. But even in challenging it, they were reacting to the framework Aristotle had established. His method for asking why in these four distinct ways shaped the entire Western intellectual tradition for nearly 2 millennia.
And today. Is it just a historical curiosity?
I wouldn't say that at all. Think about it. An engineer designing a new gadget implicitly uses these causes all the time. What material should it be made of? Material cause. What shape and internal structure should it have to work? Formal cause. How will it be manufactured? Efficient cause. And crucially, what is its purpose? What problem does it solve for the user? What's it for? Final cause.
You're right. The function often dictates the form and material choices.
Precisely. Even in biology, while modern evolutionary theory doesn't posit conscious purpose in the same way, the concept of function, which is very close to Aristotle's final cause, is absolutely central to understanding anatomical structures and behaviors. So the framework, or at least the kinds of questions it prompts, is still incredibly relevant.
Okay, from the inner workings of things and their causes, let's expand out to the grand scale. The cosmos itself. Aristotle's ideas on motion and cosmology paint a picture of a universe that's constantly in flux, yet also profoundly ordered, with celestial spheres, natural places, a universe with definite rules.
That's right. For Aristotle, understanding motion was absolutely key to understanding the universe. He starts by distinguishing different types of change, and he considers locomotion's simple movement from one place to another as the primary type of motion.
More basic than other changes.
He thought so. Other changes, like increase or decrease in size, or alteration, which is change in quality, like something heating up or changing color, he saw as secondary, often because they seem to presuppose some kind of change in location, even if it's just the location of parts or qualities within the object.
So the most fundamental way things change is just by moving from point A to point B. A ball rolling, a bird flying.
Yes. And he further divides this basic locomotion into two simple types. Straight movement, either upward or downward, and circular movement.
Okay. Straight and circular.
Straight movements are natural to the simple bodies that make up the earthly realm, the four elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Earthy bodies, like rocks or a clod of dirt, naturally move straight downward towards the center of the universe, which, for Aristotle and almost everyone back then, was the center of the earth.
Because that's their natural place.
Exactly. Fire, being the lightest element, naturally moves straight upward towards the extremity of the terrestrial region, towards the heavens. Air and water have intermediate natural places. This explains for him why a stone falls and a flame rises. Each element has an inherent tendency to return to its proper sphere.
A very ordered, elemental view. But what about the stars and planets? They don't seem to move straight up or down.
Right. Celestial motion is fundamentally different in his system. Circular movement, he argued, is natural to a different kind of simple body, one that is prior to them all and more divine than they. He called this fifth element ether, or eth.
The fifth element, quintessence.
Exactly. This implies a celestial realm completely distinct from the changeable earthly one. This realm, made of perfect, unchangeable ether, is where the stars reside, and their natural motion. Perfect, unending circular motion. He saw this as the most perfect and continuous form of movement, because a circle has no beginning or end, and it could theoretically go on forever without needing a pause or a change in direction like straight line motion does, which eventually hits its natural place and stops.
So the stars are embedded in these ethereal spheres, rotating perfectly.
That was a basic picture, yes. The planets also move in circles, but their paths are more complex, giving rise to the need for multiple nested spheres in later developments of the model, moving along the circle of the zodiac. This geocentric model, with Earth at the center and nested celestial spheres, provided a visually consistent and philosophically satisfying account of the heavens that lasted for centuries.
And this whole system of motion leads to one of his most profound and influential concepts, the unmoved mover. What's the logic behind that?
It stems from a simple observation combined with logical necessity. The observation. Things are in motion. The principle. Everything that is in motion must be moved by something else. A ball only moves if it's thrown or kicked. A cart only moves if it's pulled.
Okay, something has to initiate the motion.
Right. But Aristotle argues this chain of movers, A moves B, B is moved by C, C is moved by D, and so on, cannot go on infinitely backwards.
Why not?
Because if it did, there would be no first mover to start the whole chain, and therefore no motion could ever begin. An infinite regress of movers means motion is impossible, but we clearly observe motion. Therefore, the chain must stop somewhere.
So there must be a first mover.
There must ultimately be a mover that initiates motion but is itself unmoved. An unmoved mover, or prime mover. This mover must also be eternal because motion in the heavens is eternal. And it must be unchanging and immaterial because any change would imply it was being moved or affected by something else.
So what is this unmoved mover? Is it like a physical force pushing the first sphere?
Not exactly. Aristotle's unmoved mover isn't a physical pusher. It moves things in a different way as a final cause. It moves the universe by being the ultimate object of desire or aspiration for the outermost celestial sphere.
Like the heavens want to emulate its perfection.
Kind of. Think of how a beloved object can inspire desire and movement in a lover without physically touching them. The unmoved mover, which Aristotle describes as pure thought thinking itself, nous noesis, inspires the eternal circular motion of the first heavenly sphere simply by being the ultimate good and object of imitation.
Wow. It's a very different kind of causality.
It is. And this concept became absolutely central to later philosophy and theology, where the unmoved mover was often identified with God, the ultimate, unchanging source of all motion and order in the cosmos.
He also had argument against infinities, right? Like an infinite universe.
Yes, he argued strongly against the possibility of an infinite body or an infinite place. His reasoning was partly based on his concept of place. Every sensible body, everything we experience, is in a place. And place, for Aristotle, isn't just empty space. It has defined distinctions up, down, before, behind, right, left. These aren't just relative to us. He thought they were inherent in the universe itself, defined by the center and the periphery.
Okay.
Now, if the universe, the body of the cosmos, were infinite, these distinctions couldn't exist. There would be no defined center, like the earth, or extremity, the outer sphere, to orient up and down. So an infinite body is impossible. Similarly, an infinite motion is impossible because a finite amount of time cannot contain an infinite extent of motion. Everything in the physical world, for Aristotle, had limits, boundaries.
A finite, bounded cosmos. And what about time itself? How did he define that?
His definition of time is famously linked to motion and consciousness. He describes time as being defined by the now, the present moment. This now has a dual role. It's both the limit that divides past from future and also the connector that makes time continuous.
The dividing point and the connecting point. How does that work?
Imagine time like a flowing river, or maybe better, like counting the steps of someone walking. The now is like the single point you're counting at this instant. That point itself, the potential for a now, remains the same. It's the unchanging substratum, the counter. But the specific content of the now, the actual step being taken, the specific moment, is always different, always flowing past.
So the now as a concept stays, but the now as an actual moment is always changing.
Exactly. It's how time is both continuous, because the now is linked together, and also measurable or countable, because each now is distinct. He defines time ultimately as the number of motion in respect of before and after. It requires motion, and it requires a mind or soul capable of counting or numbering that motion.
So a universe with this definite order, natural places, celestial spheres moving eternally, all ultimately inspired by an unmoved mover and time measured by change. This sounds like it laid the groundwork for, well, pretty much how the West understood the cosmos for an incredibly long time.
It certainly did. Aristotle's cosmology and physics, particularly his concepts of natural places, the four elements, the celestial spheres made of ether, and the unmoved mover, became the dominant scientific paradigm in the Western world for nearly 2,000 years.
2,000 years, that's staggering.
It is. It deeply influenced Ptolemaic astronomy, which refined the sphere model, and medieval theology and philosophy. It provided a coherent, intellectually satisfying, albeit ultimately incorrect, geocentric model of the universe. It satisfied both empirical observation, as things appeared from Earth, and philosophical reasoning for a very, very long time. His ideas established a cosmos with inherent order, purpose, and hierarchy, where every element had a natural tendency in place. This profoundly shaped humanity's understanding of its place within that cosmos until Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton brought about the scientific revolution. It wasn't just abstract philosophy, it became the bedrock for understanding God's relationship to the creation for centuries, effectively integrating science and theology in a way that dominated Western thought. It's a real testament to the power and coherence of his system.
The living world Aristotle on biology and psychology.
It's actually incredible to shift gears now from the grand abstract structure of the cosmos and logic to something as tangible and, well, messy as dissecting animals. Aristotle wasn't just an armchair theorist.
Not at all.
He was also an incredibly keen observer of the natural world, especially living things. His biological and psychological works are just packed with empirical detail. It almost feels like reading an ancient David Attenborough sometimes. This is a huge shift from abstract principles to really hands-on investigation. He seems like a true pioneer of empirical science here.
Oh, absolutely. His approach was incredibly meticulous for his time. He wasn't just collecting anecdotes. He was actively classifying animals. He was dissecting them, which was quite unusual then, and he was trying to theorize about the functions of their various parts. He constantly sought to understand what it is, the essence or form, and for the sake of which, the purpose or function, specifically within the biological realm.
Applying his four causes to life itself.
Exactly, and this led to an incredibly detailed and hugely influential body of work. It really marks him as one of the very first true natural historians. He moved beyond the often mythical explanations of earlier times towards systematic observation and categorization. He was laying the groundwork for scientific methodology in biology.
And his observations were truly comprehensive. They seem to form the basis for animal classification and comparative anatomy. He didn't just make a list of animals, he was clearly trying to find a system, some underlying principles to organize the sheer diversity of life he encountered.
That's right. He absolutely recognized the need for a systematic classification. And importantly, he realized that simple dichotomous divisions, just splitting things into two groups based on one feature, like winged or wingless or featherless, weren't always adequate. He noted that featherless, for example, is just a privation, a lack of something, and it doesn't help you subdivide that group further into meaningful species.
So it's not just about what an animal lacks, but about its positive attributes and how they combine to define its kind.
Precisely. He classified animals based on a whole variety of criteria, moving from very general shared parts to more specific differences. He emphasized positive attributes and how they group together. Some of his key classifications included blood, sanguineous versus bloodless. This was a fundamental division for him, basically separating what we'd now call vertebrates, animals with red blood, from most invertebrates.
Okay, blood or no blood?
Viviparous versus oviparous. This is bearing live young versus laying eggs. And he was a sharp enough observer to note variations even here. He talked about internally viviparous animals like humans and horses, but also those that lay eggs internally which then hatch, resulting in live birth like certain sharks and rays, the Salacia.
Wow, he noticed that distinction.
He did. Very detailed. Habitat. He classified by terrestrial versus aquatic life, but he went further, distinguishing them by how they take in air or water, or where they find their food and primarily live. He knew a dolphin lived in water but breathed air, making it fundamentally different in its vital functions from a fish.
Looking at function, not just location.
Exactly. Locomotion. He looked at the number and type of feet, two-footed, like humans, birds, four-footed, lizards, dogs, many-footed, centipedes, insects, or having fins or having no feet at all, like snakes or eels. He also noted the presence or absence of wings.
So again, it's about the positive attributes and how they combine. And he made this really profound observation about how these parts relate to the animal's life, the function aspect, which feels incredibly modern, almost evolutionary.
You're right, it does feel very modern. His comparative anatomy was groundbreaking. He didn't just describe parts, he compared them across different animal groups. He meticulously observed that different parts of animals vary in density and rarity, in their quality or composition. And most importantly, he derived this fundamental principle of adaptation. Nature makes the organs for the function, and not the function for the organs.
Say that again. Nature makes the organs for the function.
And not the function for the organs. This wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a foundational concept for understanding biological purpose. It deeply echoes into modern evolutionary thought, even though he wasn't thinking in terms of evolution as we know it.
It means the wing exists for flying, not that flying just happened because a wing randomly appeared.
Exactly. The purpose or function shapes the structure. The need dictates the organ. This teleological view was central to his biology.
Can you give some specific examples of his observations that show this?
Oh, loads. His works like History of Animals and Parts of Animals are filled with them. He observed that most viviparous animals, mammals essentially, have external ears, while fish typically don't, though he noted that dolphins clearly hear, implying some internal mechanism. And he made the quirky observation that humans are unique among animals in not being able to move their ears voluntarily.
Huh. Guess most of us can't.
His description of the heart in sanguineous, blooded animals is fascinating. He noted it contains blood, described its cavities, though not perfectly by modern standards, and crucially, considered it the primary sensory and vital center. He even observed it tends to be physically larger in timid animals like hares and deer.
Linking physiology to temperament, that's really early psychophysiology.
It is a very early attempt. He painstakingly detailed animal locomotion. He notes men and birds have 2 feet, lizards and dogs have 4, centipedes and bees have many more. He looked for patterns, noting that these animals tend to have an even number of feet. For fish, he described the variations in fins. Some like the gilthead have 4, some like the eel have 2, and some like the marina, a type of eel, have none at all, moving instead by flexing their bodies, much like snakes do on land. These details show his drive to observe, categorize, and find patterns.
He wasn't afraid to get into the nitty-gritty details.
Not at all. He described the diaphragm, midriff, as dividing the heart and lung region from the stomach area, theorizing its purpose was to keep the sensory soul, located near the heart, undisturbed by rising heat and vapors from digestion.
A functional explanation again.
Always looking for the function. He described the typical locations and variations of organs like the liver, spleen, and kidneys, associating the kidneys with fluid excretion. He noted that the liver in animals lacking a gallbladder tends to be of good color and sweet, maybe implying better health.
Incredible detail.
He even discussed things like the tongue, noting it's bifid, forked in lizards and serpents, but absent or distinct in some fish, relating this perhaps to how they taste or manipulate food. He talked about breasts and teats, observing that animals producing 1 young at a time, like elephants, often have 2 breasts near the armpits, while those with large litters, like sows, have many teats along the belly.
Connecting anatomy to reproductive strategy.
Yes. And he didn't just stick to anatomy. He observed animal behaviors and personalities. He described stags and hares as timid, snakes as treacherous, lions as courageous, foxes as crafty, dogs as affectionate. And crucially, he distinguished humans by saying, man alone is capable of deliberation.
Assessing character in animals.
And group behavior, too. His description of bee society is amazing. He distinguished ruler bees, larger, milder, likely the queen, from the workers. He reported that bees sometimes kill most of the potential new kings to prevent the hive from splitting up too much. He even noted how bees use props to keep the comb level to ensure passage for brooding.
That's astonishing observation for his time.
It really is. He also chronicled peculiar generational facts, like reporting that young spiders or scorpions sometimes kill their parent after being born, maybe based on observing cannibalism, and the famous cuckoo behavior, laying its egg in another bird's nest, with the host bird unwittingly raising the cuckoo chick, which sometimes pushes the host's own eggs or chicks out. He was fascinated by these kinds of life cycles and ecological interactions.
That insight that nature makes the organs for the function is truly remarkable, especially seeing how he applied it. The sheer volume of detail he gathered is just staggering. What was the long-term impact of this meticulous observational approach on the study of life?
Its impact was enormous and undeniable. His meticulous observations and his attempts at systematic classification lay the absolute foundation for biology, zoology, and comparative anatomy as disciplines for well over 1,000 years, arguably closer to 2,000.
Wow.
His biological works served as the primary textbooks and reference points for naturalists well into the Renaissance and even beyond. He really pioneered the empirical approach to biology, emphasizing direct observation, dissection, and detailed description. He inspired generations to actually go out and look at the natural world with the same kind of rigor, rather than relying solely on received wisdom or abstract speculation. Before Darwin, Aristotle provided the most comprehensive and systematic framework anyone had for understanding the sheer diversity and intricate functioning of life. He demonstrated the incredible power of careful observation married to systematic thought.
And his biological inquiries naturally led him to delve into the animating principle of life itself. His theory of the soul primarily laid out in his work De Anima, or On the Soul. Now, this isn't about some ghostly spirits separate from the body like maybe Plato suggested. It seems much more deeply intertwined with the living organism itself. This feels like a really radical departure from some earlier Greek ideas.
Oh, it absolutely was a radical departure, particularly from Platonism. For Aristotle, the soul, Suchi, is emphatically not a separate entity dwelling within the body, nor is it some kind of subtle physical substance like fire or special atoms, as Democritus might have suggested. Instead, the soul is the form, or more precisely, the first actuality of a natural organic body that has the potential for life.
Okay, first actuality of a natural organic body. Unpack that.
Actuality connects back to potentiality and actuality.
Hmm.
An organic body has the potential to live, breathe, sense, grow. The soul is the realization, the actualization of that potential. It's the set of capacities and functions that make that body actually alive. So it's the animating principle, the very source of self-nutrition, sensation, thinking, and movement that defines a living thing. The soul is what makes a body a living, functioning organism, rather than just being a pilot located somewhere inside it.
So the soul isn't just in the body, it's what makes the body be a living body. It's like the difference between a functioning computer, hardware plus software OS, and just a box of inert components. The soul is the functional organization.
That's a very good analogy in some ways. The soul is a functional organization and the set of vital capacities. To lose the soul isn't like a ghost leaving. It's for the body to lose its essential form, its capacity for life. It ceases to be that organism and becomes just a corpse. The matter remains, but the form, the soul, is gone.
Okay. And he distinguishes different levels or types of soul, right? It's not just one thing.
Exactly. He distinguishes between different powers or faculties of the soul, which exist in a kind of hierarchy. Lower levels are presupposed by higher levels. First, there's the nutritive soul, or vegetative soul. This is the most basic and widely distributed capacity found in plants as well as all animals. It's responsible for the fundamental life functions, reproduction and the use of food.
Growth, nourishment, making more of its kind.
Precisely. It enables living things to maintain themselves and, crucially, to partake in the eternal and divine in the only way mortal things can, by producing another like itself, ensuring the continuation of the species. Interestingly, he notes this soul, while actually single in an individual organism, seems to be potentially plural.
How so?
Think about how you can cut up some plants and the pieces will continue to live and grow, or how some insects, if cut in two, might show signs of life or movement in both segments for a while. This suggests the nutritive capacity can be divided, at least potentially.
Fascinating. Okay, so nutritive soul is the base layer. What's next?
Next up, present in all animals but not plants, is the sensitive soul. This builds upon the nutritive functions. Its most primary and universal form is the sense of touch, which Aristotle believed is common to all animals and can even exist separately from the other senses. It's the most fundamental way an animal interacts with its immediate environment.
Touch is the most basic sense.
Yes. Then you have the other senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste. He discusses how these senses perceive things, often through a medium like air carrying sound and smell, or light enabling sight allowing for perception at a distance. He also identified what he called common sensibles.
Common sensibles.
These are qualities perceptible by multiple senses, not just one. Things like movement, rest, number, shape, figure, and size, magnitude. You can see that something is moving, but you can also feel it moving if it touches you. You can see one object, but you can also feel one object.
Okay. Perceptible through different channels. And where did he think sensation happened in the body?
He located the central processing unit, so to speak, in the heart. For sanguineous-blooded animals, he argued, the region of the heart constitutes the sensory center. All sensory information ultimately reported there.
Not the brains.
Not the brain, surprisingly to us. He knew about the brain, dissected it even, but thought it was primarily a cooling organ for the blood heated by the heart. The heart was the vital center.
Wow, that's a big difference from our understanding. What about things like sleep or imagination?
He analyzed those too, as functions related to the sensitive soul. Sleep and waking he described as affections of the primary faculty of sense perception, located in the heart. Sleep isn't just the senses not working, like if you faint or get knocked out. It's a specific state originating from that primary sense organ, likely related to digestion and changes in internal heat, during which active perception ceases. We perceive nothing when asleep, he says.
But we dream.
But dreaming relates to imagination, fantasia. This is the faculty of forming mental images or appearances based on past sense perceptions. Imagination may be false, unlike direct sensation, which he thought was usually true about its proper object. He notes imagination can be found in animals, brutes, but crucially, it operates without belief or the discourse of reason. An animal might imagine danger, but it doesn't form a reasoned opinion or judgment about it in the human sense.
Okay, so imagination is picture thinking, separate from reasoning, which leads to the highest level.
Exactly. The rational soul, nous, which Aristotle believes is unique to humans. This builds upon the nutritive and sensitive capacities. It's responsible for thinking, understanding, and deliberation. It has the remarkable capacity to distinguish between a concrete thing, like this water, and what it is to be that thing, the abstract essence or definition of water. It engages in abstract thought.
The power of abstraction and reason.
Yes. And while appetite, desire, and imagination may be either right or wrong, Aristotle suggests that thought itself, when it properly grasps its object, like understanding a definition or a truth, is always right. It has a unique connection to truth.
And how did he see the overall soul-body relationship? Are they fighting each other or working together?
Definitely working together. In his view, the soul uses the body's parts as instruments for its functions. The different faculties, sensory, motor, nutritive, need physical organs to operate. He tried to pinpoint the primary seat of these principles, arguing it must be a part that's both simple enough to receive all kinds of sensory input, but also complex enough, heterogeneous, to initiate action. As we said, he identified this primary control center as the heart in sanguineous animals, the hub connecting sensation, vitality, and movement. The soul isn't trapped in the body like a prisoner, as Plato sometimes implied. It is the very actualization of the body's potential for life, the organizing principle that makes it the living thing it is. They form a unified whole.
This holistic view of the soul, so deeply intertwined with the body's actual biological functions, clearly departed from earlier, more dualistic ideas. How did this Aristotelian view reverberate through history? What was its lasting impact?
It became absolutely foundational. Aristotle's theory of the soul provided the dominant framework for understanding life, cognition, and human nature in Western thought for centuries. His hierarchical model, the vegetative, sensitive, and rational soul, profoundly influenced medieval philosophy and theology.
Especially Aquinas, right?
Especially Thomas Aquinas, yes. He masterfully integrated Aristotle's soul theory into Christian doctrine, using the concept of the soul as the substantial form of the body to explain the human being as a fundamental unity of body and soul, avoiding a harsh dualism.
So it shaped theology profoundly.
Hugely. And even when later scientific and psychological thought began to move away from using the term soul, they often did so by reacting to or redefining the very functions that Aristotle had meticulously detailed within the sensitive and rational faculties. Concepts like perception, memory, imagination, desire, reason, the very vocabulary and conceptual landscape for discussing mental life and biological functions owed an enormous debt to Aristotle's pioneering work in De Anima and his biological treatises. It's a testament to his power to observe, conceptualize, and describe the living world, including ourselves. Outro?
We've really covered some ground. We've journeyed through these intricate logical frameworks he built, explored the fundamental principles he saw governing the universe, and then zoomed right into his detailed observations of life itself, all through the lens of this one, frankly, brilliant mind. From the structure of a perfect syllogism to, the purpose of a bird's wing or the nature of the human soul, Aristotle truly laid out this incredibly comprehensive vision of the cosmos. And it's a vision that, in so many ways, really defined Western thought for an astonishingly long period.
Indeed. His work just demonstrates this relentless, unparalleled drive to categorize, to explain, and to understand the why behind absolutely everything. It's such a powerful testament to the power of systematic inquiry, that combination of rigorous logical thought with painstaking empirical observation.
As the two together.
And even where his specific conclusions were later refined or, eventually overturned by modern science, like the geocentric model or the heart being the center of thought,
right?
The method he established, that emphasis on careful definition, on logical argumentation, on detailed empirical investigation that endured. He essentially gave us the tools to analyze, to question, and ultimately maybe to learn how to learn more effectively.
What really stands out to me from this whole deep dive is just how much his questions continue to resonate today. Whether you find yourself grappling with the nature of truth when you hear an argument, or you're wondering about the purpose of some natural phenomenon you observe, or you're simply trying to understand how things work and how they relate to each other, you can often trace the roots of your own inquiry right back to these very ideas we've been discussing. It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it, that the whole journey of understanding is this continuous process, constantly built on the shoulders of giants like him.
That's beautifully put. And perhaps it raises an important final question for you, the listener, to ponder. In today's world, just awash with information, endless data streams, complex problems, how might Aristotle's emphasis on, say, distinguishing between potentiality and actuality, what something could be versus what it actually is right now, or his method of looking for the for causes the material, the form, the agent, the purpose? How might those ancient tools help you clarify and understand the complex challenges you face today, whether that's in your personal life or in your work, or just thinking about the wider world?
Something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep into the world around you.